Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why it feels like only the exciting, earth-shattering results get published in science books and articles? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating study that sheds a light on this very question, and it is called the tip of the iceberg. This research looks at something called publication bias. Basically, it is the sneaky tendency for scientists to be more likely to publish studies that show strong, exciting results than studies that show no result or a weak result. It is like a scientist has a drawer full of studies, some with big Eureka moments and others with a shrug. And the Eureka ones are much more likely to get out into the world. This can distort what we think we know because we're mostly seeing the winners and not the whole picture. So the big question these researchers wanted to answer is just how common this publication bias is, and importantly, where it happens. They looked at studies from two big German academic research panels. Think of these panels like huge surveys where researchers can submit their ideas for studies. And if accepted, they get to use the panel to collect data. Here is how they did it. They took all the proposals that were accepted for studies in these two panels. There were 178 of them. Then they acted like science detectives, searching high and low for any publications that came out of these studies. They looked for everything from fancy peer review journal articles to what is called gray literature, like working papers or conference presentations. And here is where it gets really interesting. Even after waiting for an average of over 6 years for studies to be published, a huge chunk, nearly 44% of these accepted studies were still not published anywhere. That is a lot of potentially valuable research just sitting in a digital file drawer. But it's not just about whether a whole study gets published or not. These researchers also looked very closely at the actual hypotheses the scientists made before they collected data. They compared these original, submitted hypotheses to the hypotheses that ended up in the published papers. What they found was that a massive number of published studies, over 95%, included hypotheses that were not in the original submission. These are called ad hoc hypotheses, meaning they were essentially made up after the results were known. And even more striking, more than half of the studies that did get published only published these ad hoc hypotheses, meaning nearly all of their original hypotheses might have been left out. So, let's break that down. Out of all the hypotheses that ended up in published papers, a big chunk were added later. And when you look at all the hypotheses that were originally submitted when the study was proposed, more than 2/3 never saw the light of a publication. This strongly suggests that scientists are not only choosing which studies to publish, but also picking and choosing which hypotheses within those studies make it out. Why does this happen? The paper points to a well-known problem. The scientific world often values exciting, statistically significant results. If a result is statistically significant, it means it's unlikely to be due to random chance. You've probably heard about p-values. A p-value tells you the probability of getting your results if there was really no effect. A small p-value, like less than 0.05, generally means your result is statistically significant. But this preference for significant results can create big incentives to report only those findings that meet this threshold, even at the expense of reporting honest, null results. This pressure can lead to different questionable research practices like p-hacking, where scientists might tweak their analysis until they get a significant result, or harking, which, as we've seen, is formulating hypotheses after seeing the data. The problem is, this flood of only positive, significant results can give us a distorted view of reality. It can lead to us overestimating the effectiveness of treatments, policies, or theories, all because the data showing they don't work or have minimal effects are being left out. The study also found that this bias can look a little different depending on the scientific field. For example, psychology studies were more likely to end up in peer-reviewed journals, while economic studies often appeared as working papers, which is a common practice in that field. Survey methodology studies were the least likely to be published at all, perhaps because the results are more technical and less about a groundbreaking discovery. An interesting side note, studies that combine different disciplines were actually more likely to get published. This might be because they appeal to a wider range of journals or are seen as more novel and exciting. Now, what does this all mean for us? The researchers aren't trying to say that scientists are necessarily trying to deceive us. Instead, they're highlighting a system of incentives. The publish or perish culture in academia, the pressure to get grants, and the focus on high-impact journals all push for exciting results. But when we only see the positive findings, it can be hard to make informed decisions based on the full picture of scientific evidence. Imagine a doctor only reading studies that show a drug works and never seeing the studies where it didn't or had serious side effects. This study is a call to action. It suggests we need to reform how science is evaluated. Maybe we need to celebrate null results more, or find better ways to make sure all conducted research is accessible. Not just the winners. Things like registered reports, where the study design and hypotheses are reviewed before the study is done, can help. Also, being more transparent about when hypotheses are formulated, whether they were planned from the start or came up later, is crucial. Just clearly stating exploratory analysis revealed, instead of as hypothesized, can make a big difference in how we interpret findings. Of course, like any study, this one has its limits. It focused on studies from 2 German academic panels, so it might not perfectly represent science all over the world. And while they did a great job of finding publications, there's always a tiny chance some might have been missed. Also, they couldn't perfectly pinpoint why ad hoc hypotheses were added, just that they were. But despite these limitations, the message is clear. Publication bias is real and it is impacting what we know. It is a significant problem in the social, behavioral, and economic sciences. By understanding this tip of the iceberg, we can push for a more transparent and accurate scientific landscape where both the exciting Eureka moments and the quiet but equally important null findings get the attention they deserve. So, what are your thoughts on this research? Do you think publication bias affects what you read in the news about science? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind of science, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching!